What is good, everybody, man? Welcome into the Blue Bloods, man. Let me know if y'all can hear me in the chat. This live stream has been a long time coming. I know I took a little time off in between live streams. I think it's been about 3 months since we came on live, but we're gonna have a two live stream week this week, man. We're going live tonight doing your boldest FCS football predictions. You guys really delivered on this, man. I'm telling you, some of the predictions, the interactions that we got with this question was amazing, man. Shout out to my guy Josh Pate for 247 Sports. He has the late kick with Josh Pate, and he did this for FBS and really Power Five, where all the Power Five fans would submit their boldest, craziest takes for the 2023 season. He would rate them, we'd break them down, really talk about it. And so I really wanted to do this for FCS HBCU football, and you guys sent me so much. I posted on the Reddit FCS account. Shout out to those guys for letting me post on there, and we posted it on our YouTube and our community tab, and we got some wild takes, man. I'll be honest, we tried to go as national as we could with it, but I got a lot of responses from Big Sky fans and SWAC fans. So we have a whole we have a whole lot of HBCU bowl predictions and Big Sky bowl predictions. Like those fan bases from those two conferences went crazy. And Jerome, yeah, man, there is a member option. I'll post a link in just a second for you, man. And I think Paris or one of the moderators can probably get it in there too. But there were some crazy predictions. I do want to say, just to kind of for our second live stream this week, we're coming on and just running through some of the latest news in HBCU football. My guy, Coach Fred from Alcorn State, is going to join me. I think we're going to aim for Wednesday night, and then media days start this week. You guys, we've been kind of releasing a lot of player interviews. That's going to be put on pause about mid this week. I'm traveling to Dallas on Friday. I'll be at the UAC Media Day, which is the new conference combined with the ASUN WAC. So you'll get coaches interviews, players interviews, and I'm gonna try to probably go live from the event. Then the next week, I'll be at SEC Media Day for USA Today covering Tennessee and some of the SEC stuff. But that same Friday, I'll be in Norfolk, Virginia for MEAC Media Day. Then the next week, we got Southland on Monday, SWAC on Tuesday, and SoCon on Thursday. So there's going to be a whole lot of Media Day coverage right here on the channel and on the website, thebluebloodcfb.com. So I wanted to throw all that out there, man, so y'all can know what to expect on the channel, the website, all the social media accounts, and everything like that, man. We're taking it to another level. But let's get into these hot takes, man. I had so much fun doing research for these, figuring out what's going on. I got y'all's tweets up here. We're going full force with this one, man. So we're going to start with some of the Reddit FCS guys and their bold takes here. Danny had two of them, man. He said Sacramento State falls off a cliff. I have them having 5 to 6 losses this upcoming season, depending on how high you are for Northern Arizona. Now, for me, looking at this one, I'll tell you guys, I'm gonna rate all y'all's takes on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is not very bold at all. I could see happening. You really didn't go out on a limb. 10, extremely bold, and we're going to break down everything it's going to take to have that potentially happen. But you look at Sacramento State they were at the top of the Big Sky last year. They lose their head coach, Troy Taylor, to Stanford. New head coach, Andy Thompson, steps in. When you look at this team, though, 5 to 6 losses, looking at their schedule, I don't think this is a super bold take. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 10 on the boldness scale on this one. This is because, they do return 9 all-conference players, 2 FCS All-Americans, but the biggest question mark is, of course, quarterback. That's my biggest concern with Sac State. You look, they went and got Carson Camp out of the transfer portal. You got Caden Bennett, Carson Conklin's a freshman on this roster, but if they don't find stability in these first 3 games, I'm looking at Sacramento State in a very, very questionable light. I think Marcus Fulcher, I think he's probably going to be the star for the Hornets. I know Cameron Scadavo was amazing and All-American. Now he's at the FBS level, but I think Marcus Fulcher is going to step up in a way where it's not a huge drop-off. But this is why I don't think this is very bold. They play at Stanford. I don't see Sac State beating their former coach at a Power 5 program with the way Stanford's been recruiting and all the talent that they're bringing back. I don't think they're gonna beat Montana State. They have to travel to Idaho, travel to Montana, and travel to UC Davis. That's 5 losses right there. I absolutely can see 5 losses, and then if they get upset, like in the question, a Northern Arizona steps up or someone like that, they absolutely could hit 5 to 6 losses. The key games, though, I think UC Davis and Montana are probably toss-up games. They have very similar question marks to Sacramento State, and if they can pull off a win there, I mean, you could be looking at a Sac State team with possibly only 3 losses, 2 at the FCS level, but I'm gonna give this a 3.5. I don't think it's super bold, because of the difficulty of their schedule. And then moving on to a second one real quick, William and Mary gets exposed in the FCS playoff again. And I didn't put it on there. His specific question said a Big Sky or MVFC team. Last year, you guys saw it. I went to the game. That's when I traveled up to Bozeman. William and Mary got just destroyed by Montana State, 55-7 in the quarterfinals up there in Bozeman. They could not stop that rushing attack. The offense really couldn't get going. I talked to John Pius on the channel. He said that they just weren't ready for the weather, the travel. But for me, the big question mark with this one is, did Mike London make the proper changes, help his players learn from their experience in really their first environment? This isn't one of his Richmond teams or anything like that. Like, this William and Mary team had almost zero experience going into the playoffs this year, traveling to Bozeman, a 9 p.m., 9:30, 9 p.m. local time kickoff up there in the mountains. It was freezing, it was iced. I wonder, did that experience help them learn from that where it won't necessarily happen again? I'm going to give this a 7.5 on a scale of 1 to 10 for the boldness rating. I think the offense is going to be dominant for William and Mary next season. Darius Wilson took a large step last year. He's back for his 3rd straight season as a starting quarterback, threw for over 2,200 yards, 20 total touchdowns. Bronson Yoder, Malachi Amoa are 2 studs at running back. I don't think there's going to be a huge drop off there. Even I believe they lost their 3rd string running back. I'm blanking on his name right now, but they lost one of their Donovan Lester transferred out, but I think they'll be just fine. Wide receivers a question mark though for William and Mary. Drayshawn Kendrick, JT Mayo, and Tyler Rose have to take that next step, in my opinion. But they got the best edge duo in the country. There's not a team that you can point to in the FCS right now that has a better edge duo outside of maybe New Hampshire, where you got John Pius and Nate Lynn. Both of these guys are All-Americans, first and second team. You got Ryan Poole, freshman All-American, Jalen Jones in the back end. I really just the reason I didn't put this any higher is their schedule is a joke. William and Mary might not have any tough games. I mean, they could have one of the easiest schedules in the country. There are only 2 real tests against teams that I think potentially could be ranked. They have Elon early in the season. Right now, Elon's probably just going to be on the outside of the top 25, a fringe team. If they can string some wins together before the end of September, that could be a top 25 matchup. And then they have their rivalry game with Richmond in November 18th. Richmond's preseason top 25, but I don't know. There's a lot of question marks that they can keep that ranking. So what happens if William and Mary does not face a ranked team throughout the regular season? When you look at these Big Sky teams, MVFC teams, they're all battle tested. When they get to the big moment, get to the big game, it doesn't necessarily catch them off guard because they prepare for that moment. I don't know if William and Mary is going to have that. That's why I'm going to give this a 7.5, because the problem with William and Mary is they still are pretty young. They don't have a ton of playoff experience, and I don't think they're going to be battle tested. That could play out in the long run better for them because they could be healthy and all this other stuff. But I think when things get tight, the problem with William and Mary is they're not going to have the experience on how to respond if they get punched in the mouth by a Montana State, a South Dakota State, or someone like that. And if they have to go on the road again, man, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that one off. So I'm going to give that a 7.5 on the scale of 1 to 10. Shout out to my guy Dan for submitting 3 different ones on this one, man. We got to go to this Portland State one. I'll hit it real quick. I give this an 8.5. I don't see how Portland State makes the playoffs, just personally. They went 4-7 last year, were 3-5 in the Big Sky. He said they're going to get an at-large bid, but the problem with the Vikes is that they did not compete with any of the good teams on their schedule. 53-16 loss to Montana, 42-7 to Weber, 56-21 to Idaho, 45-17 to Sac State. And who are they passing up? Because you're looking at potentially what? Maybe 5 max bids for the Big Sky next year, maybe 6 if all hell breaks loose. But are you putting them over Sacramento State right now? Are you putting them over Montana State right now? Montana, Weber State, UC Davis, Idaho. I can't put Portland State over any of those teams right now, which is why I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to make a real run to the playoffs next year. Their defense was atrocious last year, and they lost most of their good players. VJ Malo's gone, Anthony Adams is gone, Xavier Bell, Broderick Harrell. All these guys are out the door. So who steps up on the defense that was already bad? Plus, when you look at their schedule, they play North American University. Listen, oh, if FCS teams do not stop scheduling these ridiculous teams, North American University, Lincoln, it doesn't ever pay off. Like, stop scheduling these horrible teams. It doesn't help your team in the long run. That's not going to count as a D1 win. So you're looking at what, a max 7, maybe 8 D1 wins for Portland State, and then you got at Montana State on that schedule. Oregon, Wyoming, at Northern Arizona, at UC Davis. I don't know where they put the wins together. So I'm going to say that there's no chance. As an 8.5, possibly even a 9 on the boldness scale. I just don't see how that happens as of right now. We'll see though. But going to a second one, the Pioneer champion who gets the auto bid will upset an at-large team in the FCS playoffs. So for those of you tuned in who aren't really in tune with the playoffs, the Pioneer League is a non-scholarship league. They just started receiving an auto bid in 2013. There's been a big debate on whether that should really happen. When you look at just their history, they're 2-10 in the FCS playoffs since receiving the auto bid. They never gotten at large bid before these auto bids started for them. Their only wins, San Diego won in back-to-back seasons. They upset Cal Poly, and they beat Northern Arizona in back-to-back seasons, 2016, 2017. For me, looking at this, I'm going to give it a 9 to a 9.5 on the boldness. This is the most bold thing we've talked about thus far, and we're going to get to some really insane ones here in a minute. It would, to me, there's just too many moving factors with this right now. It would depend on who wins the Pioneer this year, and is that team eligible, and then who the matchup in the first round would be. Could the Pioneer League get lucky by facing one of the lowest seeds? Possibly. Or could they face a team that's plagued by injury, had to have some weird had some external circumstances that could give the Pioneer League team a better shot? Now, that could happen. The other issue is I don't think the best Pioneer League team is going to get the auto bid. St. Thomas is probably going to go on a streak here in the Pioneer League and just keep winning, similar to kind of how Davidson has done recently. But St. Thomas went 10-1 last year, ran through the Pioneer League. They won't be eligible to, I believe, 2026 for the FCS playoffs. So this question is pretty much this take is saying the second best team in the Pioneer League is going to upset somebody. I highly doubt that. And even when you look at St. Thomas, if they could have got in, I don't think they're going to upset anyone either. They've struggled recently as they kind of get their footing at Division One against other Division One teams outside the Pioneer League. So they got a long way to go. And I just don't see Davidson or someone like that really turning it around. I think San Diego could have a nice rebuild with the coach that they just got from I want it Brandon something they just hired from the School of the Mine, Colorado School of Mines or something like that. But I just don't see the Pioneer League pulling that one off. And then the OVC. This was an interesting one, and I don't know if Dan's tuned in. My hold up with this one is it depends on what you mean by the best season in decades. The OVC overall has not had a strong recent past in the playoffs. I think Jacksonville State's really the last team to really get hot from the OVC. SEMO got knocked out early last year. UT Martin played well 2 years ago in the FCS playoffs, but overall the OVC is not looked at as a power conference. They combine with the Big South, and I do think that possibly could help a team like UT Martin because they could pile up some good wins, potentially be the second team to slide in there. I'm gonna probably go. I'm gonna probably say 7.5 with this one because it would just depend on who what necessarily you mean? Like, do you think they're gonna win the title? Absolutely not. But do I think that OVC potentially could get multiple teams in the playoffs this year? Potentially, and we'll get to that in another hot take later in the show. Moving on here, man. General Acorn from the Reddit FCS show or thread. Eastern Washington finishes higher in the Big Sky standings than Idaho. We have some hot takes on Idaho later in the show. I'll hold off on that. I'm a give this an 8.5 to a 9. There's I just don't see this. Eastern Washington last season 3-8, but it just seemed to spiral out of control after I believe it was that Florida game, probably week 4, week 5. They played Montana State really close at home, 38-35, gave them a real run for their money. But after that, things just kind of came completely unraveled for them. Their out of conference schedule this year is also tough, so I don't think they're going to have any chance to rest. They play North Dakota State, Fresno State, and then Southeastern Louisiana, who's a really good Southland Conference team, been to the playoffs, beat a Big Sky team in the playoffs in Idaho last year. I just don't see where Eastern Washington's wins are going to come over that. Their defense last year was atrocious. They gave up 42 points per game, over 500 yards per game last season, and they lost multiple impact players. Eli Doyle is gone. They lost some pieces on the defensive line. I just don't know who the superstar is on that defense, and I don't see it getting much better. Where do their wins come from in conference? They play a lot of big teams on the road this year. I just don't see how Eastern Washington gets it done unless Idaho collapses. And I don't want to get into Idaho too much because we have a ridiculous Idaho take later. But moving on to Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word makes another run to the semifinals. I'm going to give this a 7. Probably not as high as some people in the chat would put it or people thought I would put it, but I think Incarnate Word's in a very, very weird position this year. Third consecutive season with the first-time head coach, third consecutive season with a new starting quarterback, and they have to replace so many pieces, but they're going to this is an experiment for FCS football, I think, is Incarnate Word. Like, when we look in 20 years, what happens this year with Incarnate Word is going to inform decisions for other teams across the FCS subdivision for these next few years to come. And when you look at what they did, they lost 17 transfers, 14 to FBS, but they brought in 20 players from the FBS and 3 impact FCS transfers. The massive question with that is Zach Calzada going to take the same type of step that we saw Lindsey Scott Jr. and Cameron Ward taking at Incarnate Word? When you look at when they brought Cameron Ward in, he was an under-recruited question mark field quarterback out of high school that ran a weird offense, and no one knew if he could actually throw the football. When he left Incarnate Word, he got to go to Washington State and was a top 5 quarterback in the Pac-12 last year. Lindsey Scott came in. He was a second-team borderline all-conference type quarterback at Nicholls State. He comes in and has arguably the greatest college football season for a quarterback in a long time. And now you got Zach Calzada, who coming in is more proven than Cameron Ward and Lindsey Scott were when they first stepped into Incarnate Word's offense. What is his ceiling, and could Kilo unlock some sort of hidden potential? This is the same Zach Calzada who went and beat Alabama when he was a starting quarterback for Texas A&M. The ceiling is the question mark for Zach Calzada. If he clicks in this offense, Incarnate Word absolutely can make another run because their schedule is not too difficult. I think they might have 2 toss-up games. I think they could beat UTEP. And then you got Southeastern Louisiana and possibly Abilene Christian if they put it together. When you look at the defensive line, I think that will be strong. They went out and got a transfer from Sacramento State. They went and got Marcus Brown from Howard, an all-conference defensive lineman. And you still return Stephen Parker at edge, who was an all-conference player last season. So I think Incarnate Word has potential. I do think the demise is a little bit overstated because they lost so much, but I really do think UIW could surprise some people. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 7 because I really do think they have the opportunity potentially to go undefeated again. And so I'm kind of I don't know how bold that is, but it's crazy to me because when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's a 10. There's no way." And just kind of looking at the way Kilo built his roster, looking at the new staff, looking at their schedule, looking at the experience that they picked up last year in the playoffs, man, UIW has a really, really big chance to surprise some people. Looking at Holy Cross, though, this Holy Cross take, Holy Cross upsets a top seeded Big Sky or MVFC team in the playoffs. And I'm going to give this a 3. I don't think this is a very big hot take. Listen, Holy Cross got a lot of flack last year. Listen, my guy Kevin at FCS Radio and some of the MVFC CAA fans really did not like Holy Cross getting a seed, letting Fordham in the playoffs just because of I was the perception of the Patriot League is what I would say. But I felt like they proved their doubters wrong. They had a big double-digit win over New Hampshire in the second round, and it was 21-21 in the third quarter against South Dakota State on the road in the quarterfinals. They ended up losing 42-21, but they were the only program to establish any sort of consistent or just any sort of rushing threat against South Dakota State, who finished number 1 in the country in rushing defense. But Holy Cross, really, Matthew Solka, 261, 6 yards per carry, 2 rushing touchdowns. And they would have been up. I just want to put this in perspective. They absolutely could have been in the lead if it weren't for that pick six right before halftime where Sluka just missed. I want to say it was Jason Freeman right over the middle. So that really shifted the momentum in terms of South Dakota State right before halftime. But Holy Cross returns 8 offensive starters, 6 defensive starters from last season. Jacob Dobbs, an All-American linebacker, returns from injury. Matthew Sluka, Jalen Coker, one of the most dangerous wide receiver quarterback connections in the FCS. I think Holy Cross last year, especially in that first half against South Dakota State on the road, they proved that, yes, we play in the Patriot League. Yes, maybe our strength of schedule throughout the year isn't the best, but when we go up against the big guys, we can take our game to the next level. Now, do I think if they get matched up with South Dakota State again, they upset them? Probably not. But when you look at the Big Sky MVFC, these are conferences that are going to have 2, 3 seeds possibly. Don't be surprised if Holy Cross gets matched up against the right seed from one of these conferences that they pull off the upset. I mean, because we have a prediction later in the show that Montana could get a top 8 seed. We 100% sure that Holy Cross can compete with Montana? I don't know. Maybe what about Idaho? People are skeptical about their potential. I think Holy Cross proved that they can compete with the best of them. So I don't think that's a Super Bowl take, and I think that's a pretty reasonable take. I think Holy Cross is due for a big upset in the FCS playoffs, especially the more experience that they keep getting. Shooting over to FAMU, man, my guy Jordan. This came from YouTube, of course. FAMU goes 13-0 and dethrones North Carolina Central in the Celebration Bowl. Now, this one, I took a little bit of time to think about because could I see it? Potentially. It's just right now, I don't have any proof of concept of any team in the SWAC right now beating an FBS opponent. That's what the holdup for me mostly is just I right now I can't pick FAMU personally to beat South Florida. And I don't think this is a hot take. Like for me, going through kind of my SWAC preview and looking at rosters and looking at this, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a SWAC team that goes undefeated in conference. I really don't. I think the parity is going to be there this year. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of talent, and that listen, there's some weird travel games where you got PV going to Bragg, you got Southern going to Montgomery. Like, don't be surprised if someone gets knocked off because of one of those weird games. I'm gonna give this a 8.5 on the boldness scale. I don't see FAMU going 13-0. If they get to the Celebration Bowl, could they compete with Central? Yes, but as of right now, I don't think anyone's beating North Carolina Central if they get to the Celebration Bowl just with all the returning talent. Quarterbacks win national championships. When you look at the HBCU National Championship, the best quarterback right now resides in Durham, North Carolina. And so I can't see 13-0. And I personally right now don't see anyone beating North Carolina Central in the Celebration Bowl. And so I'm gonna say no. I bet would I be surprised if they win the SWAC, get to the Celebration Bowl? Not really. I mean, they're going to be one of the favorites to do that. But I just right now I can't pick FAMU to go 13-0, especially with the news today that Kamari Stevens back in the transfer portal, one of the weirdest recruitments that I've seen. I don't know exactly what happened, but he posted a screenshot from the recruiting coordinator or something like that from FAMU, and it seems to be that it probably wasn't a peaceful re-entering to the transfer portal, which I don't necessarily blame FAMU because you just get announced that you're going to be representing you're going to be representing your school at SWAC Media Day, and then less than 2 hours after the announcement, he's back in the portal. So I just I I'm trying to do some digging on that, but I'll let you guys know. But right now, I don't think FAMU goes 13-0, so I'm gonna give that an 8.5 out of 10 on the boldness scale for right now. And we're going to Tennessee State because we got another one, man, from the Reddit thread. Average MTSU enjoyer, Tennessee State fan on the Reddit page. Tennessee State wins the OVC. Oh, this one, this one's so interesting because I got asked this on the what podcast was I on? The Golden Boot podcast. We talked about Tennessee State. I came on there and previewed Tennessee State with them. Tennessee State wins the OVC. I'm gonna put a boldness scale on it. I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10 on this one, just because I'm so high on SEMO right now. I think Southeast Missouri State, when you look at the Big South OVC, because if Tennessee State's going to win the OVC, he's also got to win the Big South because those two conferences have a scheduling alliance this year. So I personally think that they could compete, probably second, third place spot. But when you look at SEMO, they returned 5 FCS All American. They return they returned double-digit all-conference players. Paxton DeLawrence back, Geno Hess is back, Ryan Flournoy's back. You got Zach. I want to say it's Geeg at center, who's an All-American, one of my favorite offensive linemen in the country. I just don't see how Tennessee State wins the conference overall. So I'm still gonna give it an 8.5. Listen, let's look at their schedule. So Notre Dame, probably a loss. I got them beating UAPB, but these are the conference games. Gardner Webb in Nissan Stadium in Nashville is a game Tennessee State needs to win. That's the team that won the Big South last year. They lost some talent. You got it. That would be the first step forward in winning the conference. You look at UT Martin on the road next. That's a critical game. They did not compete well with UT Martin last year. It's now a road game. You don't have SEMO on the schedule. You have to knock off UT Martin if you're going to get this done. Kennesaw State's an out-of-conference game. Norfolk State, Lincoln, Lindenwood, Charleston Southern, Eastern Illinois, and Tennessee Tech are your last 4 games if you're Tennessee State. Those are must-wins. If Tennessee State does not finish the year 4-0 in conference from October 28th to November 18th, the last week of the season, Eddie George has to win those games. Those are must-win games. Even if it's not for the OVC title, you have to have 4 wins in conference at the end of the season with those 4. There's no one in that list when you have Tennessee Tech at home, at Eastern Illinois, at Charleston Southern, and home against Lindenwood. None of those teams should be able to beat you, especially with Draylon Ellis coming back, with the defense that Brandon Fisher's been saying that he has, with all the linebacker talent that they have. Tennessee State's got to win those games. The 2 toss-up games are going to be Gardner Webb, UT Martin. But just because I don't see anyone beating SEMO on their schedule, I think SEMO wins the Big South OVC. Tennessee State has the potential to compete for that second, third spot, but right now I cannot give them the OVC Big South going into next season. So that's the only reason I'm going to be hesitant on that. This is the Idaho take I was talking about. Idaho finishes 4th or 5th in the Big Sky. This is a hot take, just because for people who are not Big Sky fans watching or listening, Idaho was preseason ranked top 5, top 10. So if their preseason ranked that high, obviously they're finishing fourth or fifth in the Big Sky would be a huge letdown for Coach Eck in that squad. 6-2 in conference last year. They lost to Southeastern Louisiana in the first round, obviously. But the reason everyone's so high on them is their offense is loaded, absolutely loaded going into next season. You got the reigning Jerry Rice Award winner at quarterback, Giovanni McCoy, Hayden Hatton, Jermaine Jackson at wide receiver. They're the only team in the country with multiple 1,000-yard wide receivers. Anthony Woods returns at running back, was their leading rusher last year. Their major hole is linebacker. They have to have that solved going into late September when conference play begins. I believe their first conference game is Sacramento State. They have to figure that out. Trey Thomas from South Dakota was a great transfer pickup, but they really don't have any other proven pieces at linebacker. Their defensive line, I think, is going to be better than expected. Sam Brown, Ben Bertram returned from last season, but they also went and got Keyshawn James Newby, who was an all-conference edge rusher at Division II. Jahari Larman is a new addition for them too. I like how their schedule lays out, and so I really do think this is a pretty bold take. They get Sac State, Montana, and Montana State at home. I'm gonna give this a 7.58 on the boldness scale. I think that would be a huge letdown for Eck and the Vandals if they finish fourth or fifth in the Big Sky. I definitely think they're going to probably finish top three next year, especially with all the question marks surrounding Weber State and Sac State going into next season. Moving on here, another UAC Big South OVC question or hot take here. My guy Reddit FCS says there will be a total of 3 teams combined to make the playoffs in the Big South OVC and the UAC, which is the combination of the ASUN WAC. And there won't be a single team from either left in the playoffs come the quarterfinals. Oh, this one, I'm gonna give it a 2. Probably the lowest boldness rating that I've given, because each of these teams, both each of these conference affiliations, both have auto bids. So at least 2 teams combined from these conferences are going to make the playoff. So only one team needs to earn an auto or an at-large bid. So the question becomes, what is the perception of these conferences come the end of the season? When you look at the Big South OVC, I think SEMO gets the auto bid. The question becomes, can UT Martin or Gardner Webb do enough to get the at-large bid? Possibly Tennessee State looking on the outside, but I kept them out right now because of that Lincoln game, and because that's not going to count. Norfolk's not going to be a strong out of conference game. UAPB is not going to be a strong out of conference game. I don't know if Tennessee State's going to have the resume to get in there. So you're really looking at UT Martin, Gardner Webb as a potential third team representing the Big South OVC. When you look at the UAC, Eastern Kentucky, Central Arkansas, Stephen F. Austin, possibly Abilene Christian if they could take that next step. I personally think that team's going to be UT Martin. That's why I'm going to give this a 2. I think UT Martin can find a way to get into the playoffs. I think SEMO gets the auto bid. I'm going to ride with Eastern Kentucky getting the auto bid out of the UAC. So I don't think this is very bold. I do think 3 teams are going to get in. You'll have the 2 auto bids, and then you'll have 1 team that earns that at-large bid, which is, in my opinion, is probably going to be UT Martin or SEMO, depending on whichever team wins that conference. This is, I believe, the last Big Sky question before we get into a whole lot of HBCU and just national talk. But Josh over on the Reddit said Montana makes the playoffs as a seeded team. So Montana is going to be a top 8 seed in the FCS playoffs next season. This, I'm going to give a 7. Not super high, but it's still a bold take, because when you look at Montana last year, they really they were on the bubble last year, and a lot of people thought they didn't belong, especially with the out of conference schedule, some question marks just surrounding that team in general. But they proved that they belong with the first round win, had a massive comeback against SEMO before eventually losing to North Dakota State. They have the offensive weapons, in my opinion, to be a major contender next season. You look at the entire offensive line pretty much returns. You got Hunter McGinnis, AJ Forbes, Chris Walker. The leading rusher from last season comes back. Xavier Harris can back him up. He has some experience as a starting running back. Cole Grossman and Junior Bergen, both back at wide receiver / tight end. Both are probably going to get All-American looks. If the QB situation can be answered, and this is something that is so frustrating because I feel like Montana fans, people who really support FCS and have really watched, this has been the narrative surrounding this team for multiple seasons. If Montana has a quarterback, they would do X, Y, and Z. That's that's been the narrative. And so what is the quarterback going to look like? You got the transfer from Boise State coming in. I want to say it's Sam, and then you got Chris Brown and Clifton McDowell coming in as transfers. Clifton McDowell came in from Central Arkansas. Chris Brown's been on the roster for a minute. Could they push him in fall camp? And then also, man, another questionable out of conference schedule. Now, the D2 school they did schedule, Ferris State, is one of the top D2 schools in the country. That's fair enough. But who else? Butler, Utah Tech. I don't think there's anyone that really pushes the envelope non-conference wise. But you look at their conference schedule: Montana State, Sacramento State, at Idaho, and at UC Davis are going to be the swing games. You've got to win two of those. If you can go two, if you can get two, possibly three of those four, and man, hell, if you get four, if you go 4-0 in that, you're easily a top 8 seed. But 2 to 3, you got to get two out of those four, 3 out of those four to be a top 8 seed, in my opinion. So I'm gonna give it a 7. I think they have the offensive talent if they can solve the QB issue, but that's a narrative that's been surrounding this team for a really long time, to say the least. And looking at, we'll take these at one at a time. North Dakota State has some takes, and I think it's funny. 2 Montana State fans submitted these hot takes for North Dakota State. But the first one, North Dakota State loses 2 regular season games this year. So when you look at North Dakota State, they lost a lot. Let's just keep it. Let's just be honest. They lost a lot of talent. There's a question. I mean, Cam Miller is the projected returning starter, but I still think Cole Payton could take over that. In my opinion, I have no problem with Cam Miller, but I think Cole Payton unlocks what they need to get past South Dakota State when they get back there. I really do. I just think as good as Cam Miller can be, he's too inconsistent, and I don't see him taking this North Dakota State team to the next level. Like I'm trying to, like, Cam Miller can take this team deep into the playoffs, possibly win the MVFC, take them to a national title. But I think Cole Payton is like the NOS turbo boost on this team, and will take them over South Dakota State. Like that to me, he unlocks another level. But leaving that where it is, we'll talk about that another day. When you look at North Dakota State's schedule, they got Eastern Washington and Minneapolis. I think they beat Eastern Washington. Maine, I gave them a win. Central Arkansas, I got them losing to South Dakota State on the road. To me, that's the one guaranteed loss I see. I personally think the second game is going to come in the final 2 weeks of the season. Either Southern Illinois, which comes to the Fargo Dome, so it's the least likely of the two. But that Northern Iowa game, November 18th, on the road in Cedar Falls in the Dome, Northern Iowa has been known to give people problems. They push these really great MVFC teams to the limit. They're always on they're on the bubble for the FCS playoffs consistently. I think Northern Iowa could be that team. I'm gonna give this a 6.5 out of 10. I don't think it's super bold. I could see North Dakota State dropping one of those 2 games after South Dakota State. Just in a weird upset. I still think they'll be a top 8 seed. I still think they have a team that could go win a national championship. I'm never going to doubt the Bison, but with all that they lost, I can definitely see 2 losses being a possibility, but 9-2 does not keep them out of the conversation for a national title. When I look at the next tape, this is a 10. It's the first 10 I have given out all night long. The first 10, North Dakota State is not going to lose in the second round of the playoffs. And they're just not. I mean, the matchup would have to be outrageous, where it would have to be something like North Dakota State doesn't get a seed, or someone or someone goes through injuries early in the season and doesn't get a seed, and then it's like a major matchup that should have been in the quarterfinals or semifinals happens too early, similar to kind of Weber State, Montana State last year or something like that. But I personally don't. I don't see how North Dakota State doesn't make it to the semifinals this year. Like, they're probably going to have home field advantage. A lot teams are not going to the Fargo Dome and knocking them off consistently, especially in the postseason. I think this is a 10. I personally don't see North Dakota State losing in the second round of the playoffs, even with all their losses. I think they're going to be better defensively than people think. They have a lot to replace in the secondary, but I think the front seven is going to be a lot better than people expect. They got some young guys who I really do think could take that next step. The offensive line's always going to be good, and I think Zach Mathis could take that next step, especially if Cole Payton or Cam Miller take that next step at quarterback. That's what Zach Mathis could be, a all-American type wide receiver if North Dakota State could just feed him the ball a little bit more consistently. So it's really going to come down to, do we think North Dakota State takes that next step in terms of a passing team at quarterback? That's not in their identity, but it might be what it's going to take with all the losses they had. Tamarick Williams is back at running back. I expect him to have a big year as well. So I don't see North Dakota State losing the second round of the playoffs. That is a 10 for me. My guy Leon, I think he's in the chat right now. And this one's interesting. The FCS champion will be a 3 to 4 loss team. So doing some research, looking back into history, the last team to have 3 losses to win the national title was 2008 Richmond. They were 13-3. They went 6-2 in the CAA. Funny enough, that was Mike London's Richmond team. Vincent Brown was the coach on that staff, who's now the new head coach at North Carolina A&T. A lot of recognizable faces that are still relevant in FCS football. That's the last team to lose 3 games. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give it a 9.5. Leon, I like the boldness, because I think that would be so chaotic if it could happen, but I just don't see it right now. When I look at teams who I think are national championship teams, and I think about their schedules, I think about their path there, I don't see anyone losing 3 to 4 games. I think 4 would be a 10. I don't see a 4-loss team winning, Leon, but a 3-loss team would be a little bit more possible, which is why I dropped it down to 9.5. Because when I look at, we just talked about North Dakota State possibly having 2 losses. What happens if Montana State, kind of similar to last year, has a few injuries, gets tripped up in conference play, doesn't get a seed, makes a run, getting healthy late, kind of like when Malott stepped in there in the 2021 season after McKay transferred out. You could see some weird changes like that, where a team could get hot and potentially a 3-loss team. But this year, I still think it's the Jacks to lose. And right now, I don't see 3 teams beating South Dakota State this year, Leon. So I'm going to give that a 9.5 on the boldness scale. And then before we get into I think we got 5 or 6 hot takes after this, strictly for the SWAC. This one, my girl V put this in, and I really like this prediction, because it really got me thinking. Because at first, people are going to be like, "Man, there's no way." But Furman's a preseason top 5 team. They return a lot of talent. They're going to go through a difficult conference schedule, and last year they were probably 1 play away from getting past Incarnate Word, and I think Furman probably goes on to beat Sacramento State and makes that same similar type of run. I don't think this is as bold as people would think. I'm gonna give it a 7.5 V, because I'm riding with South Dakota State. I think they're gonna win it. But once you get past South Dakota State, you look at North Dakota State, Montana State would be right there. After those 3, though, it is there like a definite contender after that? I don't think so. You look at the offensive line, they returned Jacob Johannan, Pearson Toomey. They went and got Fred Norman, an all-conference offensive lineman from ETSU, to combine with him. Dominic Roberto comes back at running back. Tyler Huff is back at quarterback. Hugh Ryan returns at safety, was a first-team all-conference guy. Braden Gilby, Travis Blackshear return on the defensive side of the football. They got a lot of talent, man. I mean, really, Jace Wilson was the backup. He transferred over to Texas Southern, of course, but they went and got Mark Hernandez from Army, Tex Elliott from Colorado State, to add to an already impressive offensive line unit. And this is the key with Furman. Everyone's high on Montana State. Everyone's high on X, Y, and Z. Furman returns 18 starters and 38 players from the 2 deep roster. So 38 out of 44 of their top players from last season return. And when you look at the only game they lost outside of they lost to Incarnate Word by 3, and they lost with a backup quarterback by 8 to Sanford on the road. That's when Tyler Huff went down and Jace Wilson stepped in and led them and threw for like 300 yards and almost upset Sanford. I think Furman this year could be that team that we look to take that next step. And when you look at the Final Four, of course, you had Montana State, North Dakota State, South Dakota State. Incarnate Word was that team last year. Could Furman take Incarnate Word's place as that new team that that found their rhythm, recruited great talent, and just puts it all together and gets to that top four, that those top four teams in the semifinals? They they played Incarnate Word really close, and I think they easily could have won that game. They had a big play or two called back due to holding. They were good calls, but I think Furman is a team that could take that next step, make a run deep into the quarterfinals, semifinals of the FCS playoffs. So not super bold. V, I love the question, but I think Furman is going to be a lot better than a lot of people expect. Oh man, let's get to this now. Listen, we had some insane swag MEAC takes in this series, and I had to combine some of them because a lot of people have the same bold takes. So we'll start with Valley here. Um, my guy Cam said Valley will finish with a winning record. We'll take that in consideration with this one. And my guy Zoe Phillips said Valley will beat North Carolina Central. Those are the two bold takes right now for Mississippi Valley State this year. So when I look at this one, the I is my guy Coach Anderson's recruiting at the highest level Valley's recruited in a while, but I still think they're going to catch somebody and they'll be a lot better than people think. But man, looking at their schedule, a winning record's going to be, man, it's going to be tough. They do have a tough schedule. Let me pull up their schedule because I didn't pull up their full schedule. I want to make sure. But the Central game, I don't think is the one they're going to catch someone. Oh, 3, 4. So looking at their schedule, I think Valley has at least 4 wins on their schedule. I don't see people. I know people are upping up Bethune in a way, like because I feel like people feel bad for Bethune sometimes, especially with everything that went on this all season. They're like Bethune's going to catch someone. They're giving them Valley. I don't think. I think Bethune has a chance to go winless in conference. I'll be 1,000% honest. I just Bethune Cookman, I don't think is going to be very good this season right now, unless something changes and they got some players that take a huge step forward. But I think Valley can beat Bethune. I think they can beat UAPB at home. They're definitely going to get both D2 games, in my opinion. So that's 4 wins right there. So you're looking at them picking up 2 games somewhere. You look at the rest of their schedule. Could they catch Alabama State coming to Inabena? Could they catch Alabama A&M in the last week of the season, similar to how they did PV? Could they catch PV again? I think this. I think the 6. I think the winning record is not as a hot take as beating Central. Like when I look at, like I said earlier, and I told you guys earlier, I don't see someone catching Central. If this game was in Itabena, I would give it less of a bold take. I would say it's less of a bold take, but playing at a neutral site after Valley just beat them last time they played, they're not sneaking up on Central. Central's going to want to make a statement. I think that's a 10. I don't see Valley beating Central this season. I'll be honest with that, but I think the winning record is probably about a 7.58. It's not a Super Bowl take. I got them having 4 games right now, and I think they have the potential to. They got the potential to catch someone else. So I think 4 to 5 is more reasonable, but 6 I don't think is completely out of the conversation. So no, I don't see them beating Central, and Valley with the winning record. That could be a little bit of a debate if we really want to get into it. Grambling State, though. makes the SWAC championship, and Zoe has Grambling State winning the West. So Zoe and Cam have very similar predictions, which is why I combined them. Hmm. I'm gonna give this a 6 out of 10 on the boldness scale. Not high. I think this is about right on point, just because of how chaotic the West could be. We talked what 3 months ago. There are if I could pick 5 teams in the West right now, and if I told you they were going to win the West, if you weren't a fan of one of those 5 teams and you were just a typical HBCU SWAC fan, you can honestly say that you could possibly see it if some things go right. Grambling, Texas Southern, Alcorn State, Southern, and PV. All 5 of those teams, I've heard someone with some sort of credibility say that team could compete for the West this year and get to the SWAC championship. So I don't think it's a bold prediction. They have a new quarterback coming in. Miles Crawley should be an upgrade over what they had last year. Have arguably the best receiver in the SWAC right now in Lyndon Rash. Their offensive line is revamped. Their running back room is absolutely loaded after what everyone saw in the spring game. And then they got Sundiata Anderson, possibly a candidate for SWAC Defensive Player of the Year. Linebacker Lewis Matthews comes back. The only question mark is secondary for them. So they also got a new offensive coordinator in Tony Hull, who's going to revamp that offense. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility Grambling can win the West. So I'm going to give that a 6. I don't think that's a Super Bowl take. And I think with how chaotic and up in the air the West is, I don't think that's a super hot take given everything that's going on. Bethune-Cookman upsets Florida A&M. I already addressed Cam's FAMU undefeated season because Jordan put it in earlier. I think I'm gonna go with 10. No, I don't see this. I mean, unless something just catastrophic happens for FAMU, I don't see how Bethune-Cookman knocks him off with all the talent that FAMU is returning this year compared to what Bethune-Cookman has question marks at every single position, lost their best offensive player to FAMU in wide receiver Marcus Riley. You don't know what it's going to look like at quarterback right now. Wide receiver is empty. Offensive line's a big question mark. The only outside of defensive back with Amari Hill Robinson, there's no one there that really interest anyone or has any hype coming into the season. You just look at everything FAM returns. I don't see how Bethune-Cookman upsets them. That's a 10 on the bold take scale. That would be that would change. Mm, that would change the whole conversation around Willie Simmons going into 2024. If FAMU loses to Bethune-Cookman, I mean, because I'm assuming, because I know with Zoe, he's probably predicting Jackson State to beat FAMU too. I mean, you can't have that happen. You cannot, like you said, it was SWAC championship or bust. You can't win the SWAC and then lose to Bethune-Cookman again, especially after the streak Bethune just got off having. That would change the whole conversation around his career and his future at Florida A&M. So that's a 10. I don't see that happening, but that on the bold take scale, that's a 10 for sure. Then when you look at Morgan State, the next prediction was Morgan State wins the MEAC and South Carolina State finishes number 2. So that means North Carolina Central would have to finish 3rd, probably. I'm assuming it was the prediction here from Zoe. I don't know if he's in the chat. This is another 10. This is a 9 or 10. I mean, okay, so I think it's an 8.59 if you say Morgan potentially could win the MEAC, possibly with that defense, but they got too many question marks at quarterback right now for me. And how do you replace Alfonso Graham at running back? But man, to say that, I think it's the whole South Carolina State finishing 2nd thing that pushes it to a 10 for me, because you look at South Carolina State last year. Yes, they upset North Carolina Central, but are you putting? I mean, that's a lot of. You're putting a lot of stock into Corey Fields. yes, that's a Celebration Bowl winning quarterback. I mean, I'll give you that, but God, that is a lot of stock to put into Corey Fields and a defense that at times last year was bad, and then an offense that couldn't move the football. The offensive line regressed. Oh, that's a lot. I don't personally see that. I see. Listen, I see my guy D in here. He's saying Central won't win the MEAC. Be willing to put money on that. That's cool. I think Morgan's probably this Morgan and Howard right now. I would have to put over South Carolina State just personally right this second until I see South Carolina State establish some sort of offensive consistency. I can't put them over because I think Howard's a better team right now, personally, just from top to bottom. When you look at Jared Hunter, when you look at Quentin Williams, when you look at Casey Hawthorne at wide receiver, the offensive line led by Dankwa. Um, you got Brokenberg coming back at edge. You got Kenny Gallup and All American safety for them. Yeah, that's gotta be a 10 for me, man. I don't see that one. Mm. I'm just trying to like put connect the dots on this. So I'm gonna give that one a 10, man. We're gonna move that one on, and that was a big one on that one. So my guy, I want to say it's Xavier. That was the last name in that one. Jackson State wins the Celebration Bowl and beats Texas State. Mm. To rate this, I'm gonna have to give this a 9.52. This is a bowl take two, and the only reason, and it's not even just the Celebration Bowl one. It's the beat Texas State one, just because. I mean, bro. I mean, like the proof of concept that like I just want to put in perspective. So the last FBS win by the entire conference, all what was it now, 12 teams in the SWAC, all combined, have not won an FBS game since like 1985. That's 11 that's 11 years before I was born. There's just like no proof of concept with that, and so that's the hold up. Because listen, I mean, I really do think in just in the media right now, there's a lot of people that don't know where to place Jackson State as a team, which is fair. I don't think Jackson State fans would say that it's unfair to say that there are question marks with this team. Like, just no one knows what it necessarily is. Yeah, everything can look good on paper. You can bring in all the transfers. The same thing I said with Incarnate Word. I just You don't know what they're gonna get. You brought in damn near 20 FBS transfers, but are they gonna gel? Are they gonna live up to the hype? Because we've seen FBS guys come down to FCS and be All-Americans and set the world on fire. We've also seen them come down and be atrocious. So I just that's true. Okay, so I forgot about the Bethune-Cookman one when they were in the MEAC. So that is fair. So currents like it since teams have joined the SWAC, the last team that was in the SWAC conference was like 1985. I want to say it was Grambling over Oregon State, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that is a fact. And shout out to my guy Scotty, man, got married this past weekend, man. Shout out to you and congratulations to you and Key, man. Y'all deserve it. I hope y'all had fun celebrating with friends and family up there, man. But with everything that I could say the same thing about Texas State. I don't know what they are, but I'm gonna give that a 9.5, possibly a 10, just because of the Texas State one. I mean, that it's just until I see a SWAC team get that win, get over the hump, because Jackson had competed with ULM. What was it? FAMU played USF pretty well. I want to say they competed in the first half, but I'm trying to think even like in recent years who outside of Jackson with ULM even competed with an FBS school. Mm, I'm trying to think. Man, it's just been such a long time. So that's the hold up for me, man. Xavier, that was a great take. But yeah, Grambling with Arizona, that's when they had Kincaid. What was that? 2017, 2016? I want to say. Yeah, 2016. So that was really the last time someone really gave an FBS school a scare outside of Jackson ULM. So that's going to be the holdup, man. And I'll say this because I was talking to Zoe about it. I don't remember if it was off camera or on another show. The SWAC needs that game. They absolutely need that game just for the perception of the conference because Howard beating UNLV, North Carolina A&T when they were in the MEAC, knocking off some FBS opponents, like it helps the overall perception of the conference. You saw last year the CAA had like the first what was it, 3 upsets of the year for FBS schools. Like for the conference as a whole, it's a prideful thing. The SWAC needs someone to do it, whether it's Alcorn State versus Southern Miss. I don't know if I don't really see that one happening. You have Jackson versus Texas State. You have FAMU versus South Florida again, which probably shouldn't be a big blowout. You have Texas Southern, and I want to say Rice is one of their FBS games. Even if you don't get a win, you have to compete because the air is going to get taken out of the conference if FAMU and Jackson go into these games where a lot of people think they can compete and they should compete. Jackson and FAM should not get blown out in either of those games. If they go in there and get boat raced, man, the confidence of the conference is going to be bruised, to say the least. You have to compete in that game and look good. You really do. And so I think the SWAC as a whole really, really needs Jackson to go out there and represent for the conference. And I was telling Zoe that I really think the SWAC is hanging their hat on FAMU and Jackson going out there and representing the conference. And one of those two teams have to come back with an FBS skin to hang on the wall. It hasn't happened since 1985, 1984. It's got to happen this season, or you start looking at it, it's like, man, when is that streak finally going to end? So that's where I'm going to leave that one. This is this is an extremely, extremely, extremely bold take here. I'm taking this bold take to like a 15. This is my guy Corey Johnson. This is an insane one. This has got to be a 15. So Corey's bold prediction is there will be 4 SWAC teams: Florida A&M, Jackson State, Grambling, and Prairie View A&M with strong enough records and resumes for the FCS playoff consideration. Shout out to my guy Corey Johnson, man. Listen, my Caleb Johnson's dad, man. Shout out to him for supporting the show and submitting this one. Oh, okay. So we're going to exclude Grambling for this conversation just because. Okay, so we have to exclude Grambling because they can't even go they can't, because Grambling plays in the Bayou Classic, which is the first weekend, which is the same it's the same weekend as the first round of the playoffs. So Grambling has to be taken out of consideration. So Grambling can't go. So now you're stuck with FAMU, Jackson, and PV. I don't think FAM's going to have the resume to go because of the 2 D2 games. And at this point, I don't think Willie Simmons would even want to invite with how he's spoken out against the playoff scheduling and all this stuff. And, you know, they need to put more respect on FAMU and all that, which is all fine and good. But I don't think Willie Simmons cares at all about going to the playoffs. And I don't think with the 2 D2 games, you're going to get that. The only way FAMU gets in is if their one loss is a close loss to Jackson. They beat South Florida, and then all hell breaks loose in the SoCon or the OVC Big South or something like that. Like, you would need pure chaos to have to go on where the bubble is just like there's just no option but to put FAMU in. When I look at Jackson's schedule, this is where Jackson gets interesting because they don't have anyone really out of conference that to hang their hat on either, because you got FAMU week 1 in conference. So your out of conference games are Southern, which is a conference team, Texas State, and and then South Carolina State. The only way Jackson, I think, would have even a conversation is if they lost one game. It's a close loss to FAMU. FAMU is a one-loss team, only lost to South Florida. They win the SWAC. Jackson's sitting at 11-1, only lost to FAMU with an FBS win. And then on top of that, South Carolina State's got to go on a run and win the MEAC again, because then they would have a win in a neutral site over the MEAC champion. They would have their only loss would be a close loss to FAMU in week 2, or week 1, really week 1. They would have an out of conference win on the road against Southern, who probably needs to go win the West. And then they got to get a win over Texas State, which would be an FBS win. That would be the only possible scenario where they would probably even be in consideration for the playoffs. So FAM would need a lot, especially with the two D2 teams. Jackson would need to lose a close one to FAMU, win out, need South Carolina State to win the MEAC, and Southern to win the West, possibly even the SWAC. So that's the case. I mean, this is a bold predictions. We got to have bold explanations for some of these predictions. Grambling, I'm not even going to break down the scenario, because Grambling can't even be eligible. So there's no reason to waste time breaking down Grambling just because they can't go because of the Bayou Classic. It's impossible. I'm trying to bring up PV's schedule now because I'm just trying to think how because PV would need something of the same thing, where PV would have to lose one SWAC game, not go to the SWAC championship. So you would be looking at their schedule. They would have to lose to either Southern, Alcorn, or Texas Southern in a close game, and then win out. So PV would have to have wins over Abilene Christian, Southern Methodist, which is SMU, and Houston Christian would be their out-of-conference games. And the problem is Houston Christian is atrocious. They're probably the worst team in the FCS right now. They would need Abilene Christian to get hot and probably win the UAC this year. That might be the only way they considered. You would have to have a SMU win on your schedule. That's going to be a brutal. I don't see PV beating SMU, but if they did, that would probably change the conversation around their resume. So you would have to beat SMU, have to beat Abilene Christian, hope Abilene Christian either goes to the playoffs or gets that at large, or gets the auto bid for the new UAC conference, which is the ASUN WAC combination. And then you would have to have a close loss to one of the West teams. Like that would be the only way, in my opinion, that PV would be able to qualify for the playoffs. So that just shows you you would have to have everything fall into place. I'm trying to think. Sheldon, that's not going to happen. FCS teams don't travel to FCS teams. You hardly ever see Power 5 teams travel to Group of 5 teams, and they're really in the same division. It just you play FBS teams for money games. So the only way like a SWAC team would host an FBS team, Sheldon, is if the SWAC team paid an FBS team to come to them. So you would have to have Jackson pay Southern Miss like $300,000 to come play in Jackson. And with the financial situation of some of the teams in like the SWAC and everything, I just don't see I don't see a SWAC team wanting to pay that much for an FBS opponent to come to their home stadium. Appalachian State UNC is a whole different, it's elite. I can't. Maybe someone could tell me in the chat. I'm trying to think who's the last Group of 5 team to travel to. I'm trying to think of the last Group of 5 team to travel to an FCS school. I think it's only happened like 1 or 2 times in the history of FCS football, but I'm not 100% sure. And I missed this. I missed number 5 for Cam. I saw the banner. I just forgot to pull it up. So his last bold prediction. I'll get back into the. I'll get back into this. Hang on. UNA's FCS, Reese, that's North Alabama. They're in the UAC. Well, okay, so they're in the UAC now. They were in the ASUN last year, so that's an FCS school. But Cam's final bowl prediction is a non-Dakota school wins the national championship. I that's going to be a 9.59 for me, man, just because I'm so high on South Dakota State. Right now, I think when you're looking across the FCS, you put North Dakota State in there as always. They're almost like the default number two. Montana State's going to be in the conversation. I think Furman is going to be in the conversation potentially. You look, and maybe Incarnate Word could sneak in there, Holy Cross potentially, but I think it's really going to come down to the two Dakota schools and Montana State. That will, if you were putting money, those would be your top three on the national champion coming from one of those three schools. Would be my best guess. I would rank it South Dakota State, and then I think 2A, 2B is North Dakota State, Montana State right now, just because of everything North Dakota State lost. But yeah, those would be the top three. I think that's a bold take just because it has not happened very often. Sam Houston State and James Madison are literally the only two schools since this dynasty started for the Dakotas to beat either of them in the play. So, yeah, I'm a say that's a pretty bold take, man. Let me pull this down and let me get to some of y'all's comments, man, before I roll out here. So, yeah, Virginia Tech went to Old Dominion, so that's Power Five going to Power Five going to Group of Five. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is just I don't think a lot of these schools want to pay for that because that's a lot of money because you're looking at Alabama. So like Alabama State received what was it, $500,000 from Auburn when they paid them. I want to say it was 500K. They received something like a little bit more than that, I think, from UCLA to travel out there. I don't know what Central's payout was this year. I'm trying to think of some of the like more recent payouts. What Texas State's paying Jackson like 350K to come to San Marcos. I think that was another one. So Dustin, my shout out to my guy Dustin. He said Army went to Yale for the 100th anniversary of the Yale Bowl. Yeah, so it's going to be something special like that. So I don't know what the Vets anniversary is or something like that. Would be the only way I think you would see a Group of Five team come to an FCS school. Is it would be like some special occasion, like that. Stephen F. Austin to the Natty Dustin. That's also a 10, man. Like my biggest thing with Stephen F. Austin, they lost so much. You look at, I mean, from quarterback to wide receiver to offensive line to defensive line to secondary, Stephen F. Austin was just gutted this past season. So I think Stephen F. Austin takes a step back this year unless they just have some guys who step up unexpectedly. I still think they could compete for the UAC, but I think that's a team that's probably first round and done if they get in, possibly second if they get the right, like if they get matched up with the Pioneer League team, Dustin, guess what? You're going to the second round. I'll say that. I love the bold takes, man. I appreciate all of y'all submitting y'all's bold takes. I'm thinking about continuing this as we get closer to the season, man. We had a really, really great turnout, just in terms of submissions and things like that. But yeah, I'll be on here for, let's see, probably 10 more minutes, man. So get your questions in the comments. Anything y'all want to talk about, man, let's hit it. And I'm gonna get with my guy Coach Fred. Probably Wednesday night we'll be back just doing just a basic HBCU news rundowns, things like that. My prediction for the Stephen F. Austin Alcorn game right now, I think Alcorn can get the win there. That's another game. So when I was talking about the SWAC hanging their hat on Jackson and FAMU to win their Group of Five games, that's an FCS out of conference game that the SWAC has to have. Last year, Alcorn State dominated Stephen F. Austin for like 95% of the game, and then special teams cost it for him late. Jarvion Howard was unstoppable. It looked like it really and truly looked like they were going to run away with that game, and they choked it away at home. That could have been a huge feather in Fred McNair and Alcorn's hat. and he just let it get away from him. And I think they addressed their needs this offseason. It is on the road, but Stephen F. Austin's kind of a question mark right now. Like I said, with all the pieces that they lost. So right now, I would favor Alcorn just because they have more continuity. But it's going to be an interesting game on the road. I'll say that. I just need to see who they got returning at some key positions. Listen, I'm going to be at UAC Media Day. This Friday in Dallas. I'll be over in Dallas and I'll get to talk to Colby Carthel and all those guys and see what they have. I see Stephen F. also has a better quarterback this year, which will help. Biggest problem is losing our defensive coaches again. I'm telling I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because they have I don't know, but it seems like the Texas schools, specifically in the FCS, whether it's Incarnate Word, Stephen F. Austin, they just get robbed consistently in terms of staffs. Like every year, it seems like someone's replacing a D coordinator or lost their cornerbacks coach or lost their OC or QB coach or everything. It's just ridiculous, man. They like the Texas FCS schools just get ransacked every all season. It's crazy. I think Texas Southern will be a factor. I like I said, I think they're competing for the West to get to the SWAC championship. If Andrew can stay healthy, that run game can continue to be as good. They got to replace the pieces on the O line. The real question for Texas Southern is, can they replace some of the pieces they lost in the defensive backfield? They have to develop an edge rusher. For the past few seasons, they have not had a guy who, in the crucial moments, can go get the quarterback. If they can check off those two boxes, they absolutely can get to the SWAC championship, in my opinion. And you have to see what the wide receiver you got to see what the wide receiver room looks like. Last year, they really struggled, and Texas Southern really, really suffered due to the inexperience and lack of execution in the wide receiving room. And it put Andrew in that, and really the offensive coordinator in some really, really bad spots. So I think those are some of the bigger question marks for that one. I don't have a prediction on that game yet, Johnny. Right now, I'm holding off until I get all the official rosters and stuff for that game, like throughout media day, because South Carolina State still hasn't updated theirs, and there's some people I got some question marks about. So I'm gonna hold off on that, but I still think I've already said it. I don't think that game's gonna be a blowout either way. That one's gonna be. I still think that one's gonna be a close game, regardless of who you have winning. Uh, hmm. I don't know. I'm aiming for 80%, Reese. I think last year, I don't remember what my pick'em record was last year. I want to say it was somewhere just under 80%. Like it was good, but I want to take it up a step, man. I had a bad start. I choked in week 0 and week 1, and then we had like a streak. I think I had like a streak of like 3 weeks where I was undefeated. So I'm gonna try to get 85%, man. Uh, let's see. Is losing to Bethune right now a kiss of death? I got to root for BC after all they've gone through, but it can't be good. Yeah. Mm. I looking at their schedule, man. There's nobody in the swag that should lose to Bethune Cookman. I think if whoever loses to Bethune Cookman is going to have a lot of questions to answer, to say the least. I'll just say that there's depending on what coach loses to Bethune, they I'll just say that that they'll have there'll be a long plane or bus ride home. And that we'll just put it like that. Dustin, anytime, man, just hit me up and you already know I'll hop on with all you guys. Have I ever thought about being a coach? Yeah, for sure. I did, but man, I love what I'm doing now, and so I wouldn't change anything. I I'm trying to think because for me, I don't know if I'd want just kind of being around coaches, talking to people. I would probably say I would if I got to pick, like if I could pick any position. I mean, of course, it would be O-line, but, like, for me, I would also want the title of recruiting coordinator. Like, if I went I if that was ever, like, the way I went, I absolutely would wanna be a recruiting coordinator over everything. Where put me wherever, analyst, whatever position, assistant, it doesn't matter. Like, for me, the number one thing I would wanna do is be a recruiting coordinator. just talking to people I know who are recruiting coordinators and seeing everything they do and all the interactions, like I personally think I could be pretty good at it. And I think that would be one of the most fun positions to be a part of, especially going to a situation where they historically don't recruit well, and being able to kind of like elevate it and set a new standard, and kind of change the perception of it, and kind of have like a challenge. Recruiting has always been my thing. That's a reason why, like, even my side gigs right now all have to do with recruiting. I'm a huge recruiting guy. I love going to high school games, watching high school film, uh, getting to know recruits, looking at the recruiting rankings. Like, for me, that would be that would be what I would want to do. Put me in whatever position, but absolutely, I recruited, as long as recruiting coordinator was on my title somewhere, man, you could sign me up for that. Let's see, be careful, Blue Valley lost to them. That was last. I'm talking about this year. This year, Lauren. No, I don't think I don't think anyone should lose to them this year. The last person for Mobile to go to the NFL. Oh man, man, you put me on the spot now, Reese. I'm trying to think who was the last person to go, because hmm, that's a good question, Reese. Man, I'm blanking on that because there's been so many guys. I mean, yeah, Roger McCreary, that would be the answer, and that's even worse. That's an Auburn guy. Roger McCreary would probably be the one. I'm trying to think, because Roger McCreary went, what, 2 years ago. I don't, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think anyone from Mobile this year for the NFL draft. I'm just trying to rack my brain. Unless there was a guy from South that I'm just like missing, because South Alabama always seems to have a guy who goes like late mid round who's potentially from Mobile that I everyone just kind of forgets about. So I think it might be Roger McCreary, Dustin. That's a damn good guess too. But guys, I'm about to shut this down, man. An hour and a half in. I appreciate you, all of you, for submitting your bold takes, man. If you're um, I know. I got to get back up on my Mobile history, man. That was my bad. Listen, I've been filling my brain with too much FCS stuff that kind of let the I've definitely kind of let the Mobile history go. But man, I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. You could catch the replay, of course, on YouTube. The audio version will be released on all audio platforms shortly, just in a few hours. So catch it tomorrow if you're listening to this behind time. Be back later this week with another live stream. I'll be in Dallas on Friday for UAC Media Day. And then next week, be in Nashville for SEC Media Day, MEAC Media Day on Friday in Norfolk, Virginia. And then the next week, be in virtual Southland Conference Media Day, be in Birmingham for the SWAC on Tuesday, and then Thursday I'll be in Greenville, South Carolina for SoCon Media Day, man. So you can catch me at all those places that we're about to start traveling. Cannot wait. Player interviews coming as well. But guys, for the Blue Bloods, we are out right now.